Hello, I'm Jorge Gestoso. Welcome to a new program. On today's show, the new book, Fear, Donald Trump in the White House and the Midterm Elections with Brian Becker, National Coordinator of the Answer Coalition. Brian Becker, warm welcome to the program.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Brian, the new book, Fear, Donald Trump in the White House. In the last page, page 357, his former lawyer, John Dodd, closed the book with 5 words. You are a liar.
Well, you know, if you look at the political establishment, all the political figures, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, and if the criteria was, do they lie? Do they lie? You could probably say, we could frankly say almost all of them do lie. Donald Trump, however, has a particular place in American history in the pantheon of political leaders. And what Bob Woodward's book is trying to describe is that unlike other presidents who have problems, who have conflicts, that this is a White House in chaos. And it's because of the personal leadership qualities of Donald Trump. And of course, as we might remember, this book came out the very same day that the op-ed, the anonymous op-ed appeared in the New York Times, written by a Donald Trump administration official, who the New York Times called a senior official. So those two things came together.
Anonymous also.
Also anonymous, like many of the sources in Bob Woodward's book. I mean, the narrative that's been put together, while he quotes people, he also makes things up. And everybody who's read Bob Woodward's many books, and I think he has 8 about different US presidents since Richard Nixon, it's kind of a conflation of truth and mythology, facts and fiction. So Bob Woodward's book has made a lot of money, as we will talk about some more. It's created a big hit. It corresponds to the media narrative about who Donald Trump is. Again, we have a situation in Washington, and I think Woodward's book expresses this. There is a veritable civil war within and among the political establishment here in Washington.
What he portrays in his book is there is what he calls administrative coup d'etat inside the White House, he says, and most of the closest allies call him on his back idiot, liar, amoral, ignorant, and therefore they say that they're trying to hide things in order to stop him to make big mistakes.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, in fact, the government of the United States isn't just one person, whoever that person might be. We can remember at the end of Ronald Reagan's term in office in the late 1980s, Reagan was clearly suffering from dementia. They didn't let the country know or the people know. They just quietly sort of, organized the government around the president, who was at that point not capable.
You think that he suffers from dementia?
No, that's not my point. My point is that there's a pattern and practice of professional staff people around the individual personality who assume the responsibilities of the chief executive. In this case, we have Mnuchin, or Mnuchin, we don't know how to pronounce his name yet, the Secretary of the Treasury, saying that, and Gary Cohn from Goldman Sachs, saying they're doing things to deliberately prevent Donald Trump from carrying out an economic war against even America's closest allies. There's many reports of officials within the Trump administration trying to circumvent or limit, or as the anonymous op-ed reporter put, stop him from carrying out, implementing his worst impulses. So yeah, I think it's very credible. I think it's very possible. There's another thing about it, though. All of these Trump administration insiders who say, we are saving the country from Donald Trump, the man that they work for, they're trying to present themselves, in the case this ship sinks, that they are the unsung heroes, that they did the best they could to protect the country.
And you were mentioning that that op-ed in the New York Times. That was on September the 5th, and the title was, I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration. There is an anonymous, close, if you want, contributor in the White House. Any idea of who could that person be?
Well, we've narrowed it down. It could be just one of about 400 people. So it's a very big group, and we don't know what the New York Times actually means, what the criteria is for a senior Trump administration official. Is it a cabinet level person? Is Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State,
Vice President
of the United States? They used a word in the editorial that only Mike Pence and I think the leadership in North Korea likes, which is lodestar, so there's a lot of analysis. But I don't think it's probably one of the top officials of the Trump administration. It is somebody who has access to and working with top officials in the Trump administration. Again, I find the article, the op-ed, I have to say, in violation of journalistic ethics. The New York Times always tells people don't rely on anonymous sources. If you're an opinion editor, if you're an opinion writer, why not come out and say, I'm XYZ person, I was inside the Trump administration, we tried to restrain him, we formed a cabal, a resistance around him, but I'm leaving to tell the truth about the awfulness of this administration. Why make it anonymous? We don't know, does the person have a book contract coming, like Bob Woodward? Is he gonna make a lot, or she gonna make a lot of money? We just don't know what their motive is and their agenda. And what's the terrible thing that will happen to them should they come out and resign? You know, like act on principle. They'll lose their job, and they'll become very rich and go all over American TV circuits and write a book. So it's not a matter of not being able to stand up. I think it's duplicitous. I think it's a misservice to the country and the cause that this person says that they represent.
And in the last few days, there was a new poll released after the release of the book and also after the op-ed in the New York Times that shows that the job approval of Trump went down 6 points from 42% to 36%. And also it's mentioned that he's losing, if you want, support from voters, not even Republicans from 88 to 82, but mostly from what they call independents. 16 points from 47% to 31%. And it's looking like, coming the midterms election now November 6th, that those independents are playing a larger and larger role in terms of the mix of the voters. How you see coming the midterms elections?
Well, I made a promise on November 8th, 2016, the night Donald Trump was elected, that I would never make any more predictions.
You learned the lesson.
I hope. I threw my crystal ball out the window. But yes, I mean, the polls indicate that independent voters who may have voted for Trump or stayed home in 2016, they're disgusted with Donald Trump. And they're suburban voters, they're traditionally Republican voters. In some House races, they can make the difference, they can be decisive. We don't know, though, yet. I really am sort of nervous about making predictions because these polls, if they're done week by week, they can change quickly. Donald Trump has 90% support among Republican voters. They feel Donald Trump is being witch hunted by the Washington establishment. He has the support of the coal industry, the oil industry. He has the support of the war contractors. Many of the biggest banks and biggest corporations are very grateful to Donald Trump for the big tax giveaway. It's not like he's without support. And from the Democratic Party side, if you match Trump against any particular candidate right now within the Democrats, I don't think Trump loses. So even though Trump is getting a lot of bad press, and these stories in Bob Woodward's book and the anonymous op-ed thing hurt Donald Trump, I wouldn't overgeneralize it at this point. I think it's premature.
There's, if you want, sort of consensus or agreement that there are more, the Democrats have more chances to recover the House of Representatives than the Senate. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree with that. Usually after an election like this, the first midterm of a new president, the parties switch places within the House. That's not unusual. But here we have a situation where the gerrymandering in America is such that even if the Democrats get in aggregate 5 million more votes than the Republicans, they could still not be the majority in the House of Representatives because of the Byzantine, anachronistic nature of the American electoral system. So I think it's too early to tell, and the Democrats have to defend against many more seats than the Republicans do. So while there is a bit of a blue wave, perhaps, we don't know yet whether it's decisive.
And regarding the Senate, in the last few days, Mitch McConnell, that is the Senate Republican leader, the majority, his words that the midterm race regarding the Senate, he says, it's a knife fight in an alley, and he lists 9 contests that he says that are very, very dead even, and mentioned Arizona, Nevada, Tennessee, Montana, North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, West Virginia, and Florida. What could happen in the Senate?
Well, I mean, you know, the Democrats could take both houses. It's possible. Right now, McConnell's warnings are really trying to energize the Republican Party base because, frankly, a big part of the Republican Party, or some part of it, not a big part, some part of it, are, I would say, confused because of the terrible press coverage that Donald Trump is getting. It doesn't, as we know in elections, small numbers of votes can tip the balance now, really small numbers of votes. And so McConnell is trying to sound the alarm, as is Trump. He's going all around the country saying, if you don't come out and vote for whatever Republican is running right now, I'm going to be impeached. So if you care about me, come out and vote. So both sides are trying to do what they can. The Democrats' calculus is this. A big majority of the country now hates Donald Trump, fears Donald Trump. We can use that to energize our base. There's a lot of indications that the Democratic base is energized. The Republicans, on the other hand, who have somebody who they care a great deal about in the White House, they're not energized. So right now we see McConnell and Trump using essentially negative messaging to the Republican base. If you don't vote, some bad things are going to happen. They're sounding the alarm.
There is a very tight race regarding Texas. We're talking about Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke, who represents, in a way, the left-wing side of the Democratic Party. What's going on with that left-wing segment of the party?
I think the only way the Democrats can really come back into political authority and political leadership is for the liberal wing of the party, which has been suppressed. It's been suppressed since Bill Clinton took office in January 1993. So that's 25 years now. They've been suppressed. The Democrats have sounded like the Republicans. And as a consequence, the Democratic base, workers, black people, young people, have largely been apathetic. Bernie Sanders demonstrated that there's another way possible for the Democrats, but the Democratic establishment shut Bernie Sanders down.
Through Hillary.
Yeah, and so you could see people didn't care about Hillary. Hillary Clinton and the centrist, establishment-oriented position of the Democratic Party is such that she could lose to the most unpopular candidate in American history. That would be Donald Trump. So Beto O'Rourke in Texas represents what we saw with Ocasio-Cortez in the Bronx and some other indications where young liberal people of color, black and Latino people, want to support a candidate who really stands for something. Ted Cruz is such a reactionary, right-wing sort of dinosaur that even though he has all this money and so dominated the race, Beto O'Rourke has the possibility of winning. I mean, just think about it. The reason O'Rourke could win in Texas against Cruz is because of Donald Trump, because he is the champion of a liberal opposition to Donald Trump. So here you had Ted Cruz saying about Donald Trump in 2016, or Donald Trump saying about his father, he maybe killed the president. His wife was a such and such. I mean, all of this personal...
The President Kennedy.
Yeah, President Kennedy, yeah. I mean, really wild, crazy things that Trump was saying about Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz was battling back, and it was the Stop Trump movement. But now Cruz could lose his seat in Texas because Cruz has embraced the same Donald Trump. I mean, it's one of those ironies of history. But Texas, and I believe many of the southern states, which were traditionally red states, are becoming purple states. It's becoming red and blue because of demographic changes, because of the increase in Latino voters in particular, and because of the revival of a liberal wing. People in the Democrats are telling the Democratic establishment, it's not enough for you to tell us we are not Donald Trump. We are not Republicans. You have to vote for something you believe in and stand for something O'Rourke seems to be sort of igniting that kind of feeling in Texas. A very important development.
So it's going to be that sort of profile, what is supposed to be the candidate for 2020 elections from the Democratic side, in order to really propose an option to the electorate?
I think so, but then again, who is it? I mean, maybe Bernie Sanders. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders occupy essentially the same place in the political spectrum. If they run against each other, that splits that vote. Joseph Biden, I don't know. I mean, Biden is like the least exciting person on the face of the planet, with the exception of Hillary Clinton. And then the other potential contenders, Kamala Harris, maybe she's in the state of California, popular in California. She could potentially represent something like that. But I think the Democrats have a problem because the Democratic Party establishment is just like Hillary Clinton. You know, it's very hard to pretend to be a progressive when you're such a reactionary force. And you can sort of mouth those words, but when push comes to shove and in the course of presidential debates, if they don't say, look, students should be relieved of debt, housing should be affordable, healthcare should be, you know, why should it be a commodity? Why shouldn't people of all ages, family members or single people, why can't we just have the right to go to a doctor when we're sick? Unless the Democratic Party can do that, I don't think it will succeed. And the Democratic Party seems to be mainly fighting Donald Trump, not on those issues, but whether Donald Trump is a stooge of the Kremlin, which frankly, nobody in America cares about, with the exception of a small sort of class of people who are news junkies. But most working people in America don't care about that. It's not appealing to them. It's a bad message.
So if that ideal sort of character from the Democratic Party emerge, you know, that really grabs the attention of the new voters, if you want, of the young voters of the Democratic Party, Trump looks like the favorite to win 2020?
I could easily see Donald Trump winning again. You know, that's the problem. Like, you know, in 1972, I thought, as a young person, I thought for sure Richard Nixon couldn't win the presidency. I mean, millions of us were in the street. The country had turned against the war. Even the soldiers in Vietnam had turned against the war. They were staging rebellions on the battlefield against their officers. And Nixon won 49 states. 49 states.
So a shellac.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a... So I don't think, I think liberals and Democrats or people who are in this news junkie, DC bubble world are haughty and a little bit arrogant and not realizing what's really motivating people and what's the real issue. So yeah, Donald Trump could win again.
You mentioned Richard Nixon. Trump could be impeached?
Trump could be impeached, but under these circumstances, the 90% of Republicans who, they would see the impeachment of Donald Trump as a political act and the use of legal modalities and legal instruments to carry out a political sort of takedown of the President of the United States. When Bill Clinton was impeached at the end of the 1990s, his approval rating went up. He got a 70% approval rating after being impeached because the Democrats felt, well, this is just a Republican hit job. It's not really about Monica Lewinsky. It's because they've been trying to take him down. So I think impeachment might actually help Donald Trump.
Most definitely, he has been extremely loyal to Israel and its allies in the Middle East. And in the last few days, you tweet, and I'm going to quote your tweet. You say,
"That's the first time my tweet has ever been quoted on television."
You
so
see,
I want to thank you.
So you are really incurring in a different world. And you say in your words, in 1967, Israel seized the Golan Heights from Syria. Now Israel has granted a U.S. company the first exclusive license to explore for oil and gas in the occupied territory. Surprise, you said. It's a Dick Cheney-linked company, a local subsidiary of Genie Energy. So what's going on here?
Amazing, right? I mean, you had Dick Cheney as vice president. Halliburton, the company that he was the CEO of, got all the contracts in the oil fields for the recovery of Iraq's oil after the U.S. went in and destroyed the Iraqi government. Here, it's really amazing. Golan Heights is part of Syria. It was stolen by the Israelis in 1967 in a blitzkrieg-type war. The United Nations said to Israel, give that area back. Instead, Israel annexed it. Now they're doing oil and gas exploration because guess what? There's oil in the Golan Heights. And of course, here we have Dick Cheney again, who should be in prison. I mean, he should be in prison for what he did to Iraq. He and George W. Bush, 1 million Iraqis died, 10,000...
War criminals?
They are war criminals. By any measure of any objective faculty, you would say Dick Cheney needs to be in prison. Instead, the company he's advising is now getting the contracts from the Israelis for oil exploration in Syrian territory called the Golan Heights. It's awful. I mean, it's disgusting, but not actually shocking.
But is this a mafia?
I would say the mafia are small-time criminals compared to what we're witnessing in the United States. The United States political and economic order has degenerated such that it is a form of grand organized crime, not small-scale mafiosa, family-run gangsters. This is a global empire, and all of those 1,000 military bases all around the world right now, I mean, who are they helping? Are they defending Americans? The last time the U.S. was invaded was the War of 1812. The reason there's 1,000 military bases is that these bases are securing these countries for the penetration of and exploitation by American corporations like a Genie Company, a subsidiary advised by Dick Cheney.
Also, the New York Times on the last few days, September 8th was, published an article titled, "The Trump Administration Discussed Coup Plans with Rebel Venezuelan Officers." Rebels. The Venezuelans they're not rebels, they're terrorists. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it shows, again, a form of organized crime. I mean, the United States government and the U.S. media is accusing Russia of meddling in the United States election by taking out Facebook ads. Here's the United States trying to overthrow a democratically elected government, the Maduro government in Venezuela, by encouraging military coup d'etat and military dictatorship. And at the same time, the Trump administration says, we just want to return to democracy in Venezuela. Well, Venezuela has a democracy. It has an elected president. And the U.S. is trying to subvert that democracy by carrying out an illegal, extra-legal military coup d'etat organized by the Pentagon and the CIA.
Of all those issues going on around the world, which one is the one that you're paying most attention or close attention?
Well, we have to look at what's going on with Iran. The United States is ratcheting up a confrontation with Iran wrongly. It's also the new national security strategy says the U.S. now must prioritize major power conflict, meaning targeting Russia and China. And at the same time, on the bright side of things, there is the possibility of a peace agreement in Korea, ending the Korean War at long last. That's the bright spot. So those are the three big areas: Iran, and the Middle East with Iran, and of course North Korea. In Latin America, it's a complicated story, but of course the United States is hoping to overthrow each and every progressive government in Latin America. That too will have a major consequence, not just for the people of Latin America, but global politics.
Brian Becker, thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.